This is what happened to a 4-year-old girl in western Oklahoma in 1977. In the words of the Eyewitness, quote, "I was 4 years old. My siblings just left for school. It was early fall. I was walking when for some reason I looked up behind me. I know what I saw. It was less than 6 feet above me. This thing was huge. I liken his body size to a Volkswagen Bug. No feathers. I ducked down just enough, I guess, for it to be a misfit. I stayed looking up the entire time. It opens its beak. I see teeth. And at 4, I knew that wasn't right. I know the child missing is probably this fate. I have to say, in my opinion, they will need to rewrite the books. If it is extinct, then it happened after 1977. I got this report just very few weeks ago. It's an email, and I also got another report of this. But this is an incredible encounter report. It shows that not all of these flying creatures are safe. Feel free to contact me on this. I'm going to be pretty soon getting to the chat, the live streaming chat, and we'll have some communications, I hope, from at least one eyewitness, and we'll have some different opinions and views and questions. Normally it takes quite a few minutes before the actual chat begins, but I can go over some things until then. In the meantime, we'll just check in on the chat section to see if anything is active or not. Actually, it's already on the go. We already have the chat, so we'll take up here. Yancey Ricks, good afternoon, sir. Thank you for being here, Yancey. You've been here at least once or twice before, at least. Thank you so much for coming back. I'm doing great. I'm very fortunate. My wife and I are in good health, and about a week ago we got our first shots of the Moderna, I think you call it Moderna vaccination for the virus. We're going to have some other people. Usually it takes a little while, you know. Oh, Tazama Amath. Hey, how doing? Thank you for joining us again, Tazama. Very happy you're here with us. And so we have 2. Now this is quick. We started a little late, but basically the subject here is that we have so many sightings over the last few decades. I've been doing this work investigating these flying creatures for 17 and a half years. And from my experience, the vast majority of encounters that people have are safe. The animals don't attack people. But there are exceptions, and we need to deal with those and get why it's important we know about these exceptions. Okay. So, again, if anybody wants to contact me, if they have any comments that they'd rather use the email, just feel free. But so grateful for all those that participate in these live streams on the PAL channel, Protect Animal Life channel on YouTube. So, let's see if anybody else has joined us. We have quite a few participants in the last few live streams, but usually it takes quite a few minutes before they actually get many people here. I'm going to be dealing, if I have time, and if there are not too many comments right away, I might just get into this. This is a book that was written by one of my associates, Bird from Hell. It's by Gerald McIsaac. And he's not a professional writer, but it's just a nonfiction book. It's not a fairy tale. It's real. He's not a professional writer in the usual sense, but very grateful that he wrote this book because it has incredible reports of these apparent similar flying creatures in a particular part of British Columbia in Canada. And we should get into that unless we have some other questions or comments that would override it, because I want people to feel free to participate. go to chapter 8 here, and this is a, let's see, there's a report of women going missing and other people, but mostly women. The problem that seems to come up is that women and children, and sometimes men, go missing, and this attracts a lot of attention when it's women and children, but also it's not restricted to the females. Let's just mention a little bit of this from page 60 in the book. As I can't quote it because of copyright issues, but basically hitchhikers go missing, and the author of the book is concerned that they're missing because they're attacked and killed by these large flying creatures that McIsaac and I believe are modern pterosaurs. So let's get right into this. Yancey asked if I may ask, how many sightings are from the 1800s? I know that there are a few, well, at least a few. In newspapers, there are some. And Tazama Ahmad says, with all these crazy weather anomalies, I can see sightings being increased. Well, sure, it's possible. I think a good reason for this, though, is that we have so many people that are getting online, especially English speakers. They're getting online a lot, and they're researching and they're learning how to find information very quickly from all over the world, from many different type of researchers and so on. So it's accelerating in the past few years, and especially the past couple of decades. And so people have opportunity to find out about these sightings, which they didn't know about before. And people in remote areas contact me and my associates too, but more me than most of my associates, because I've been doing this for so many thousands of hours for so many years. But basically, I believe that the sightings have increased a lot, mostly because so much is published. I've published 5 nonfiction books myself, 1 scientific paper in a peer-reviewed journal, and over 1,000 web pages and blog posts. But I'm not bragging, because that doesn't mean I'm a genius or anything like that. It's just I'm telling you, we have a lot of material, a lot of time involved with this. So basically the point is there's a lot of danger in the overall scheme of things, not in the average encounter, but it's just the occasional attack is really concerning to me. I'm really concerned, and I want people to know about this, what's going on. For example, back east, quite a few years ago, there were 3 men that were out fishing in the middle of the night. And I wish, I tried to find this on my computer. I searched online this week. I think I still have it on my computer somewhere, but I didn't know, and I'm sure it's still out there. But basically, these 3 men were out somewhere, I don't know, in Maryland or New Jersey, somewhere in that part of the country back east. And they knew a good fishing spot, and they were there that night, and they were attacked by what one of the eyewitnesses said was a huge pterodactyl. It just came down there repeatedly trying to get them, and they were whacking it with their fishing poles, and they kept it at bay till finally, after quite a long time, it gave up. I suspect, and I've mentioned this before, I know, but it relates to the other things that we'll be talking about. I've mentioned this in other of these live streams that we've had here on this channel on YouTube. It still really concerns me, because there might be some cases where people are actually die, and the authorities don't know what happened. They can't testify. Perhaps they're alone. There's a lot of problems that can come, even if people are not seriously hurt. Who do you report this to? How do you deal with it, get hospital care, and not make the doctors and nurses think you're absolutely insane by saying you're attacked by a giant pterodactyl? Our culture does not look kindly on this type of report, though the people are honest when they say this generally, and they're not crazy. There are very few exceptions, but I'm saying in general, people are just telling the truth. So we can go different directions, and we can go off to the reports from British Columbia, and I can tell you some things from this book, but be aware that I'm not going to be reading out of it, quoting so much because of copyright issues. Copyrights, you can't copyright an idea, but you copyrights are on particular words. So I hesitate to actually read from the book without permission from the author. So I can read from my own book, of course, and I can look up things here. This is the third. I have many books, but this is one of them, the third edition of Live Pterosaurs in America. And if we have the situation where it looks like that would work out, I'd be happy to quote and read from it, if you like. Some of those cases where a person was in danger or possibly was in danger. Because sometimes and I've mentioned this before, but a person might be standing out somewhere and a parent pterodactyl, which technically it's a pterosaur, a ropen, or other pterosaur, but it will fly right at them and it will dive toward them somewhat, but it will miss them and pass over their head. And the person might not be aware, if it's high enough above them, they might not be aware of the possibility that has come to my mind, that situation where the animal passes directly over the eyewitness's head, directly, I mean exactly over the head, I suspect was originally an intention of attack on the person from that flying creature. But it could be speculative, of course, but generally the circumstantial evidence is it probably was an attack. Okay, Mr. Bean 169, thank you for coming back. Glad you're here too. We've got a good crowd here. And Jesus is the only way is here. And I'm glad you're here. And Tazama and one or two others. So we're right into this. I can talk off the top of my head, of course, with sightings, but I could miss a lot too. So I tried preparing, and I did the best I could under the circumstances, but I can relate experiences people had. For example, the attack many years ago, probably decades ago, in northern Papua New Guinea against a native fisherman there in an area around the neighborhood of Manus Island and those little islands that are in that area in northern Papua New Guinea in the southwest Pacific. It's north of Umboy Island, which is where I led an expedition in 2004, way back when I was younger than I am now, not young. But that case of the attack on that fisherman was very serious because I don't have a direct eyewitness account to me, so I'm telling you something that's been relayed I don't know how many times. I prefer to give first-hand accounts because I can get the report right in front of me and I can read it to you, and that's a reading of the eyewitness's own words, and that's the most valuable. But sometimes we need to be aware that there may be some importance in these second or third-hand accounts when somebody dies, and in this case, the man did die. I don't have his name. I mean, I could get the name of the person that reported it to me if I had the time and ability to quickly get to it here, which I don't. But it was many years ago, and it could have been at night. I don't recall, or it wasn't reported to me, but I suspect that was a case when this attack was territorial. The man was fishing. These flying creatures are known to fish in that area, and if the man was fishing at night, that possibly could cause this core, K-O-R, what I believe is the same species as ropen, I believe. The same species, the animal would feel that its territory was under threat, and it would attack the man anyway. It was a long fight they had all the way into shore. They were fighting with each other, and both of them doing damage to the other. So after a while, the core died, and the man was severely injured. He was found by some other local natives and people that live there, and trying to get some care for him, but he eventually died. I think it was about 3 days later, something like that. So there was a certain time, I don't know if it was before or after this, when the natives in that area who used to go out fishing, they stopped fishing at night. I don't know if it's anything to do with this particular attack, but there was a time when they did stop night fishing in that part of the Southwest Pacific. Thank you, Yancy, for the question. What is a commonality between all attacks? I don't have a lot. I'm not sure if I can help you much there, because they're relatively rare. I mean, if I could think clearly, like when I was young, and just come up with all the ones that I've ever encountered and remember them all, it would not be a huge number even then. So commonality, don't know, because it's just such a wide open field. I can give you some examples, but in New Zealand once, I can hardly call it much of an attack. It was a tiny little animal that had wings, and it was strange, not like a bird. And the girl was kind of irritated. She was reading a book or something? And she was sitting there, and the flying creature was like close to her and making noises, and she just kind of brushed at it to kind of get rid of it, just get out of here. And it bit her on the finger. And then it flew away. But I wouldn't call that an attack. No, but it happened. And then there was a case, let's see, what other cases could we give? That one back east on the East Coast area with those 3 fishermen, where I suspect it was territorial. Don't think the animals are trying to eat people, because it's just not, especially in the United States, I don't think it's a common thing for even the bad flying creatures to attack people. But it's possible there are a few bad ropens in certain parts of the North America that do attack people as a habit. And that turns out to be a missing persons case. The person just carried away, and occasionally the body is found. But what is the commonality? Well, let's look into it deeper. In some cases, it is actually the animal is trying to get food. Now, I believe, and I firmly believe, that the natural food for most of the larger ropens and the larger flying creatures that may be related to ropens, the natural food for the big ones would probably be certain wildlife up until recent generations of human generations, because now we have so much livestock and so many farm animals all over North America. So they could be getting those. I mean, I could give you, of course, the case for the strange sort of apparent attacks in just a few miles south of where I live here. It's it's a place where there's a number of sightings. I've been there. I've looked all around. I've interviewed people all over there. And I've gone back, and I've taken one of my associates there, and we've looked to. We don't know when it will come back, so it's kind of hard, We can keep going day after day, night after night, but keep your camera handy, I suppose. But it's maybe not the best use of my time, unless somebody like somebody calls tonight and they say, "I just saw one a few minutes ago, and there's this giant pterodactyl in." Draper is the name of the city south of me. A giant one. Then I could interrupt this live streaming and rush off, and then on the next live stream I'll tell you what happened. But not likely. It doesn't happen very often. But in that case, I told you before, I know there's the sighting in the backyard with the mother and 12-year-old son, and it's a gigantic creature. The boy doesn't want to be outside anymore. That was at nighttime. he doesn't want to be outside. That was frightening. It was a big dragon-like animal. He didn't want to be outside. But another time, his sister heard this horrible cat screeching. It's like it's being killed or tortured, and then suddenly it was cut off, and the cat was totally quiet. That is freaky. Freaky. It was just next door to them, where they had this sighting of the ropen flying right over the roof of their house. They have a big house, I think, 2-story at least. But and then and then next door on the other side, the man has chickens, and one day or night he went out and the chickens were dead, but they're not eaten or torn apart. They were stomped on. Looks like they were squished. Like, I don't know if that's related, but it's kind of weird, and it's right next door to the sighting, just like the cat screech was next door, but on the other side. I suspect a lot of these attacks are not against humans, but are more like against cats and dogs or farm animals, perhaps, that are outside. And incidentally, if I didn't mention it before, there is a small slaughterhouse very, very close to this neighborhood. It's in the same neighborhood, very close to where this sighting took place. I don't think that's a coincidence. I think that's related. We don't have very many slaughterhouses in the Salt Lake Valley. There are just not that many, and we don't have very many places in the Salt Lake Valley where people have reported a modern pterosaur, at least in the few years that I've lived here with my wife. So what do they have in common? Well, yeah, we could divide them up into the cases where it could be territorial dispute. And I interviewed a man, what was his name? Can't remember. It's one of the natives on Umboi Island. And I interviewed while he was holding two of his boys. And I interviewed him on videotape. I got it videotaped, and I have it on other videos on another channel, somewhat on this channel, mostly on another YouTube channel that I have. But I interviewed him, and he was out at night. Excuse me. He was out at night with his friend, and they were out with what they call a torch, but we call it in the United States a flashlight. It was waterproof. They take it out and put it underwater and go underwater. And his friend was underwater to catch fish. And he told me it just puts the fish asleep, so you just grab and catch them easily. So my friend, the one man I was interviewing, he was in the canoe. The other man was underwater with the flashlight, and all of a sudden, everything all around him lit up. The native said to me, it was as bright as daybreak, and you could see the trees on the shore. After a while, I was thinking about this after I had finished my expedition, went home, and thinking what he meant, because that seems like a little too bright to light up, to be like daytime. But he didn't say daytime, he said daybreak. There's a difference. I suspect what he meant was when the sun first starts to come up in the tropical areas, the sun comes more like straight up or close to straight up. And it's sundown and sunset are quick. Oh, they happen so fast. But there is a brief time, even there in the tropics, where they're getting a little bit of light, and it will not be nearly as bright as normal daytime, but it will be a lot brighter than nighttime when you just have stars or moon to give you light. I think he meant that so that he could see the trees. There's enough light to see the trees. Anyway, it lasted 5 or 6 seconds, about 6 seconds, and then it disappeared. Well, that's standard for the ropen of Umboi Island. And I think what it was doing, the ropen at that time was giving him a warning, saying, hey, this is my territory. You're catching fish with a light at night. Might probably thought it was another ropen. Probably doesn't understand about humans using light, but who knows what they think. The rumor is that these animals are very intelligent. So it's possible they may have realized that they were humans with the light, that they were catching fish. It was underwater that they were using the light. And that ropen is very much acquainted with catching seafood at night with light. That's what it does. So probably a territorial flash warning, nothing serious. There are, though I should say, this is just speculation, but, I have to tell you things that I learned on Embo Island. It cost me so many thousands of dollars. At least I should teach people, what I learned. I haven't mentioned this much in my books, but I heard one of the natives there in Umboy tell me when I was there that there was an old woman. Somehow she got the idea that she just wanted to go off up in the mountains on that island and just be eaten by the ropen. That's crazy, boy. What crazy can you get? She took a walk and left, and she never came back. And you know what the natives would say. Well, of course, you know exactly what they're going to say. The ropen got her, but who knows? It's speculation. Okay, Yancey Rick says, have you ever thought about mapping all the sightings on a map? Just curious. Yeah, in fact, I have, in a rough, kind of crude way, I have. There's a number of pages online where you can get that sort of thing in the sense of it being how many states have sightings in the United States, for example. And I do have somebody that I've been communicating with, this lady who is, she already has, put up little pin marks on a map of the United States, the 48 continuous states of the USA. And it's interesting, but you have to be very careful. And I told her, I warned her about this. Very careful about drawing conclusions, because the first thing that goes into people's minds, including her mind, she made the same mistake. You see dozens and dozens of reports over here in California. Dozens. And then you see a few in the middle of the United States. And then you see lots of reports over on the East Coast, even including New York and New Jersey, North Carolina, South Carolina, and all these, It's not because the flying creatures are very numerous in those places, not at all. If you look at the numbers, they correlate very closely with human populations. When there are lots of people, then you have a lot more possibility of people having a sighting. And because of that, you have more of a possibility that somebody's going to report them to me. And it happens in that order. In other words, there are, who knows how many ropens and other modern pterosaurs, not so common. The ropens are the most common. There might be, well, I'm just talking off the top of my head, talking off the top of my head, but there could be many hundreds of these flying creatures all across North America, at least hundreds. Of course, that means if it's actually literally hundreds, that means they're kind of rare because, how many pigeons and crows and seagulls do we have in North America? It's comparatively very rare, these flying creatures, but have a certain number of them. And people don't see well in dark, so they don't usually see them in dark or recognize them. It's just something that goes by in the dark at night, and nobody thinks much about it, hardly ever. But at daytime, occasionally one will fly up and you'll see them. But you have so many times when the creatures might be flying, usually at night, occasionally at daytime, and you have so many millions of Americans, 300 million Americans, that could see them at different times. I believe every day someone sees at least once. And so many people that can see them, but the good sightings are not that common. They would be in the more like the hundreds of thousands. And a lot of them are not good sightings, and people just brush it off and say, oh, trick of the light. It couldn't have been what I thought it was. But then others say, it's a pterodactyl. But very, very few of them report it to any cryptozoologist, like my associates and I, or cryptozoologists. No, very, very, very few. Tiny, tiny fraction of them report it to us. And I've been through this before. I think that what happens is, over many years, I've noticed these cases where, like in San Fernando Valley of Los Angeles, just northwest of Hollywood, that area. There's somebody reported me a sighting, and then his girlfriend saw it, and it was a gigantic flying creature at night, and it was somewhat glowing parts of it, and it flew overhead, and they were just shocked. They reported it to me, and I interviewed both of them, and then the man told his associate, his friend at where he works, he told his friend about it, and he had a similar experience, about the same area. It was a few miles off, but not many miles away from the other one. Gigantic flying creature at night. And it was not, this is not the same night. It was not at all the same night. I would have noticed that if it was. It was not the same night. I don't remember how much time there was between them. I don't recall, but both of them were, or at least one of them was fairly close to the Los Angeles River, which is very important. The other one was closer to, I think, a small old channel that used to be a stream bed a long time ago, and now they've turned it into a channel, which is a smaller one that I suspect probably would go right into the Los Angeles River. But anyway, so I know that sometimes a person reports something to me, and sometimes they will know somebody else that's seen it. But generally, the other person, this is exceptional in San Fernando Valley. It is exceptional. Generally, what happens, the person that reports to me knows one or two persons who has had a similar sighting of a pterodactyl that's alive, living pterodactyl. They have another sighting, but they never contact me. The other ones never contact me. So I know somewhat, that gives me an idea. I'm not brilliant in math, having some formula where I can figure it out, but I just do a crude estimate. So is it possible that there could be less than 300,000 Americans that have had a good sighting of modern pterosaur, and it just doesn't make sense. It couldn't be less than 300,000. It's just that they're very quiet about it, with very few exceptions. People don't go to the newspapers, or they don't report it to anybody, not even a cryptozoologist. They just kind of think, oh, they want to forget about it, and they just hope that they never have that kind of hallucination again, or whatever it was. Hope that it was just a temporary thing that happened. And Yancey says, could the ropens of Umboy Island be related to the dragon stories of Europe? If so, what happened to the ropens of Europe? That's a good question. I believe that my associates too believe that there's definitely a relationship. Not necessarily same species, but definitely related. If you need to be aware, though, we have pretty accurate, let's see if I can find it. That's not it. That's not, has one, you see here is a sketch by Eskin Kun, the U.S. Marine on Guantanamo Bay in 1971 when he was stationed there. He drew this just minutes after he had the encounter. At close range, no obstruction to his view. The creatures are flying very low. He got a good view of them. Excellent. He's an excellent artist. He has this talent, where people can see something and then they just concentrate, and then they'll just draw the proportions exactly as they were, and they're not relying on the kind of fuzzy artistic thinking that most of us have, which is not accurate. But he just drew it as he remembered that the proportions were, and this is what we got. And you get to the next one, and this is the title of this video, live stream, in fact, Pterodactyl attacks are dangerous. We should get into this, but this is a sketch by Patty Carson, who had a sighting also at Guantanamo Bay, but just a few years earlier. And she was a child at the time. Now, she didn't draw this until many decades later, when she was communicating with me and reporting things, and she decided to draw it. There are little details with the teeth that I helped with a tiny bit, because she just did a more rough sketch of the teeth. So did just a tiny bit with the teeth, and she said, yeah, that's good enough. So basically, this is her sketch, not mine. She sketched out all these incredible things about the eye and the shape of the beak and the wings and the neck and the horn at the back of the head. It's incredible. But we believe, and this is why I get to this, that the old drawings, sketches, paintings, and so on of dragons in Europe, they just give you the basics. They're not drawn by eyewitnesses. They're not drawn by people who actually saw them. They're drawn, basically, I'll give you an example. Somebody makes a painting of a dragon, St. George and the Dragon, or whatever it is. What actually most likely happened is they're basically drawing according to the traditions that they've seen other artists draw over the centuries of dragons in Europe. That's their traditions, that certain kind of appearances, 4 legs perhaps, a long tail with a spiky thing at the end, or that's very common. But they're not eyewitnesses, and they take it from other artists who probably themselves were not eyewitnesses, but they're taken from other people, and eventually you get back and back in history. You have an artist who talked with somebody who saw one. That's generally what happens. He talks with somebody who saw one, and that person describes what they remember and what impresses them. And you know, the head is like a horse, sort of like a horse or something like and then he'll draw that literally like whatever the eyewitness said, without digging into particulars if it was right. And the painting might be done without the approval of the eyewitness. That's quite likely. So he just goes with the general descriptions that are somewhat accurate, somewhat inaccurate. And so what we have is a lot of art of dragons in Europe, but not much accuracy. So let's see. Primal Werewolf, thank you for joining us, Primal Werewolf. Maybe someone should tranquilize one and put it in a cage. Yeah, there's been some attempts in that direction. The trick is to catch it. Basically, you really should catch it before you try to tranquilize it. I have some of my associates, they don't want me to give details because they try to keep everything secret, the location and all that. But so I won't mention the location. Why do you need to know anyway? It's in North America. And this, I don't know if they've been doing it in recent years. This was quite a few years ago. But they did set up a system where they had a mechanism that would snap when the ropin got close. And they actually ended up one time, they actually succeeded almost, and that hit on the outside part of the snapping device hit the ropin, and I don't think the ropin came back for a little while perhaps, but there was more than one of those animals, and they try. And the idea is if they can have success in that way, then if they have an animal, expert, they need a veterinarian perhaps, or somebody that's expert. They can have some kind of idea how much should you tranquilize them, and without killing them or something, and then it's hard to say. Who knows what would be the right dose? And then what do? You could put a collar on them, and I suppose, and my associates would not turn it loose. I don't think they would want to keep it. But it's very challenging, and I hope people do that instead of shooting with a gun. Don't shoot them with a gun. They want to see how they live and discover things about them, how they naturally live in our world. How do they survive? What do they eat? And how do they catch what they eat, which is perhaps about equally important. So yeah, I would say that's a good direction to go. But the most important thing for now still, and it's been the most important thing for the last 17 and a half years that I've been working on this, for way over 10,000 hours, is to let people know what we discovered. What we discovered from all these many eyewitnesses all over the world. And because these eyewitnesses, I know I've interviewed and received reports from 5 continents for the eyewitnesses themselves who have seen these incredible flying creatures. And I can tell you there are similarities with a very significant number of these reports. Major similarities in a major number of the reports. They couldn't have come from coincidence or from just people creating hoaxes or hallucinations. Even if there were somebody had a hallucination, where would they get that hallucination? If they're insane or delusional, for example, a delusion or hallucination is different, but it's both related to mental health problems. We can get into that sometime if you want, but those cases are rare. They're way under 5% of the reports I've received, way under 5%, maybe less than 1%. They're very uncommon. People are generally mentally healthy, but they're just worried about what they see. But we know from all the different type of people, and they're all different cultures and different backgrounds, that if they report the same thing, the animal is real and somewhat similar to the reports. So we have Sajad the spammer. Hey, thank you for coming, Sajad. Glad you're here. So you won't believe this. Well, let's hear it. I have footage of a pterodactyl. Great. We need to see that. Can I send it to you and you can see what you think? Sure. Do you know how to get in touch with me by the email system, the contact information? This is the URL. It's a little bit long, but I don't know what to do. I thought that people would be able to just get my name and the word contact, but then I tried it myself. No, you get a Whitcomb hotel. No, you'd have to put like Jonathan Whitcomb pterodactyl contact. Then you'll get this easy way to get there, so you don't have to write down all these letters or memorize the URL here. But let me see if I can keep that up on the screen and see how you're doing, Sajad. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Can you deal with that, or do you need to just do a Google search or something? I'd love to send it. You can send it in an attachment. An attachment. You can send video footage if it's not very, very big, very long. If you have some way to send the important part of the video, which is the animal, it's fine. I would love to see that, because we're always interested in that. But let's see if I can bring this up. Is there a way you could put a link in the description? So I just Google this and then send. Well, yeah. Yes, it's easy to Google. If you know to use my name plus the word pterodactyl, then the word contact, you should be able to get my email form here. But if you just use my name and contact, like Jonathan Whitcomb contact, you'll get things like a hotel somewhere, I don't know, San Francisco, some hotel. But yeah, Whitcomb and pterodactyl contact, I think that should do it with a search engine. Okay, I'm going to see what I can see. Never mind, you have a link. I do? Okay. Well, yeah, I don't remember. Do I have a link somewhere that you can get to it? Okay. Or do you mean this one here? Or you mean this one here? Okay. Whatever. Yeah, we always want to see what people have with footage. We have a lady in North Carolina who has footage. I have to call one of my associates. It's been too long since I talked to him. He did some work with video footage, very, very poor quality. But the lady, Cynthia Lee in Raleigh, North Carolina, she said that there was 2 of these pterosaurs, pterodactyls, and she saw it as she was getting on the bus, took out her cell phone and tried to shoot the video of it, but the creatures were flying in the opposite direction where the bus pulled out to go. And so she was jiggling footage and got just a little bit of it. But my associate says, by processing it and looking very closely and magnifying it, you can see that long tail. And in one of those two flying creatures, you can see something that could be the appendage at the end of the tail. So that's good. So let's see. And get back to the chat here. Primal Werewolf, the spammer. Oh, what's the link? Suzad, the spammer. She says name, email, address, but I can't find where I can put an attachment. Oh, well, when you don't have to, don't worry about that. When you got the link, you'll have just a form. The form is very simple. I think it's basically something like your name and an email address and a brief comment or something. Just send me whatever you could put into that form, and just don't worry about anything else right then. I will get that as an email. Then I can send you an email, and then you'll have my email address, and then we can communicate with emails. Just to get it started was an extra step, but that's for safety. I have reasons for that. I could try link it on the chat. Oh, well, that would be nice if you can do that. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not too acquainted with all these technical things with live streaming chats. Ilya, thank you for coming back, Ilya Kovalchuk. I heard from a lot of witnesses that have seen these creatures. A lot of them say that they fly at night. Do you have any ideas why? Yeah, they're nocturnal. They've been doing that for a long time, probably many centuries at least. Now, it's possible a few centuries ago they were not so nocturnal. They may have come out more. So some species, for example, and you may have had a lot of pterosaurs in the past that did that, but then if they're constantly fighting the livestock and killing your chickens, you're going to go out and get them and kill them. So maybe they became extinct, the ones that were more coming out in the daytime, and the ones that attack people regularly and in different parts of the world, they were eliminated. I mean, natives from different places anciently, we have records we have, I should say, legends or traditions of how they went about killing these giant flying creatures. And this is different parts of the world, Venezuela and North America and the United States, what's now the United States. Okay, Sajad, sir, I submitted. Great. I think links are broken in live streams. Oh, yeah, could be. Yancy Ricks, if your associates caught a ropen, what's their long-term plan? There was an Asian bovine discovered some years ago and was put in captivity. Oh, that animal is incredibly rare and died in captivity. Oh, that is sad. That is sad, huh? But, yeah, that's a good question. As far as I know, right now, and I mean this week, this month, I don't know if anybody actively trying to actually catch one. But Yancy also said what would be their plan of containment. That's a big challenge. That's a problem. What do you do? Where do you keep it? I don't know. I'm mainly concentrating I'm concentrating on making this known and trying to get more information from eyewitnesses, and I hope to get video footage because I used to be a professional videographer. I did this in different ways. I would make professional video productions and professional camera operator, and I would love to do something myself, but I'm just mainly right here in front of my desktop communicating with people about eyewitness sightings. Yeah, but it needs to be planned out, doesn't it? People need to just say, well, what do you do? How do you do it? How do you keep the animal alive? Can you feed it long term? I don't know how they're going to react to being caught and confined in a cage or something. I have no idea. And even if we do find out from experience with one, that doesn't mean that another species will be the same. I don't know. It's challenging and complicated. But some of these encounters people have are dangerous. And see if I can give some more examples. In Mexico, I know some reports where they're dangerous to people. They attack people. And, of course, we have at the beginning of this video, I go into details about a lady who, long ago, in 1977, was 4 years old, and she was attacked. It's obviously an attack. There's no question in my mind. That's a 4-year-old child that was attacked by a very large pterosaur. And it was very dangerous. She was lucky because she just dived down to the ground and it missed her. Whew, that was close. And I think, I'm trying to gather from what she said, was that she thinks there's at least one child in her area that was missing, and she's afraid that that's what happened, that the other child was caught by this big pterodactyl. And that was the end, I'm afraid. So we need to get the word out and tell people. We need to tell people so people know that in some cases there's danger from these creatures. They're dangerous to people. Not most of them, but a small percentage of them, a small number of them. Okay, Trollman, 1965, thank you for coming here. Is this your first time on one of these live streams? I'd prefer catch, document as much as possible, release. Yeah, I think that's one way. I've thought of that. Just a very quick catch and just detailed video of the animal, how it acts, and different parts of its body, and then let it go again. That could be a good way. The only thing is people say it's a hoax. But who cares? We try to do what's right and let people scoff if they want to. Mr. Beans 169, she is lucky. That was an easy snack. Yeah, she is very lucky. I don't know if I don't recall if she actually gave permission for me to use her name. She might. So, I'm going to go on a live stream a week from today, not Tuesday night as usual, because I'm going to be interviewed by somebody else for another show. So I'll be interviewed this coming Tuesday. But I have plans a week from today, Friday, late afternoon, we'll go the same thing. And Ilya says there is a YouTube video of a guy filming a pteranodon flying. It looks real. Well, I don't know which one. There's quite a few of those. Most of them seem more or less obvious to me to be hoaxes, not real. But I'm not saying they all are. Now, beware, there may be a genuine there, but a genuine video. But my experience is when I look and search and I just go over all these videos, they're mostly just jokes and hoaxes and just made up. A lot of them are 3D animation. I've had experience with animation, 2D and 3D, so I can have some ideas about a video, whether it's likely to be a hoax from a 3D animation. And Sajad the Spammer, could you send me an email, please? Yeah, sure. I'll look in my email. I can't do it right this second because we're all involved with this. Trollman 965, yes, my first live stream, although I've followed your work for a while. I appreciate what you do. Thank you very much. I'm glad you're here. I'm delighted. This is your first time. This is video. It's quite a few live streams we've had in the past few weeks. In fact, this is the third one this week. I think we had one on Monday this week and Tuesday this week, and it usually is around 4:30 or 5. I start for Mountain Daylight Time, and this one started I think a little after 5 o'clock, so it would be a little after 4 o'clock p.m. in California Pacific time, and then 3 hours later in the East Coast. So I'm glad you're all here. We'll see how many are actually on right now. Let me tell you what's happening. We have about 10 with us here tonight right now, I think. So we could talk about British Columbia, because there's a lot of native legends and talk and traditions about these creatures. The author Gerald McIsaac called it a bird from hell, but I think they might use some phrase like devil bird or something like that. I can tell you one encounter that was not an attack, but it was interesting because it could teach you something about this particular species. This teenage girl, she might have been 12, but she's not a small child. She was big for her age. She was out one night, and she thought some of the boys locally were teasing her or something. There was some noise in the bush. And, she's so tired of the boys teasing her and stuff. So she just runs out to where she heard this noise and stops dead in her tracks because it's not the boys in the neighborhood. It's a devil bird. and it scared her perhaps more than it scared her. She scared it more than it scared her perhaps because it immediately emitted this mist or vapor from its mouth or beak or whatever, and then it flew off. That was a defensive mechanism. It's generally not used for defense. It's used for, I believe, and I'm speculating, I know, and this doesn't necessarily mean all species of nothing like that, but at least one or a few species of these modern pterosaurs have this capability. They can, I'll give you an example of how it would work, okay? And this is what I believe goes on. For example, in North America, one of these flying creatures, it sees a deer at night. However it sees it, I don't know. But it finds a deer or something, maybe a fawn, a small one perhaps, that's easier to handle. But when it dives down to catch it, doesn't just grab it and tackle it and just fight to get it eaten or whatever. No, it's just too dangerous. It could damage the hollow bones of the wings of the pterodactyl. No, it has this mist that it uses to subdue the prey. When the mist is emitted, or the vapor, whatever it is, there's a difference, and I don't know which it is. Mist and vapor are not identical. They're different. But it emits this stuff, and it looks like smoke. We'll get back to that. This is important. It looks like smoke. If the prey animal, the deer, for example, inhales when the mist is near the nose, it will inhale some that go into the lungs, and it will have a major impact on that deer. Poor thing, it's incapacitated, and that can be carried away by or eaten where it is, whatever, by the pterodactyls, as people like to call them. Yeah, okay. Ilya, it seems like these creatures lean towards warm climates more. Well, that's a good question. I can give you some statistics on a very narrow sense, but not overall statistics right now. But I have done research on the morpholites in Texas, and that's, I believe, is a particular species of pterosaurs. I'm speculating, of course. It could be a strange bird that's not been discovered yet with feathers, just a bird. But it glows. It has bioluminescence. It's very intelligent. I believe it's related to the ropens we know of, if not the same species in North America. And they fly in a group, and a few times a year they will go to the Marfa area in Texas, and they will use their light, their bioluminescence, in certain ways. In warmer weather, they're more likely to be there, and they're more likely to stay longer, maybe 2 nights. But they use their light in different ways at when it's different temperatures. We should go into that sometime. I'll give you more details. But I see from statistics I gathered and analyzed, yeah, in that case, the animals like to hunt at night in warmer. But they still come in the coldest nights. But they act differently. They have different, apparently, if I understand, in colder nights, they will look for different prey animals. Not trying to find bats, but trying to find, perhaps, I'm speculating even more, digging up rabbit holes, perhaps, whatever. They act differently, in other words, and they're less likely to be seen, or at least more often. There is a correlation with that. Okay, Trollman 165. Even though I'm from Ohio, which is close to Illinois, I don't know topography of that state. Why do you think there are so many sightings of possible pteranodons and other huge birds there? Well, yeah, there's a lot of people living in those two states. There's a big human populations. When I was young, I remember I looked at statistics of human population. Illinois was one of the biggest states by far in human population. It was like, what was it, number 3 in the United States at that time. It's not now because Florida, I think, passed it up, and Texas is way up. But Ohio has always been more human population. Am I mistaken? I believe Ohio has always had a higher than average population if you compare all 50 states. But it's the human population has a lot to do. Now, pteranodons, be careful because that's a specific scientific word for a very particular type, a very narrow range of a particular type. And most of the apparent modern pterosaurs we see anywhere, United States or anywhere in the world, are not that type. They're a long-tailed type. But yeah, I think I know what you mean. Pterosaurs. The topography. Sorry. Yeah. Yeah, I know there's some persons have tried to see if there's something about the land areas close to water, perhaps, where the sightings occur, but we don't have enough sightings yet. We need a lot more people to report things to us, and we need a lot more information about species, because there's more than one species. It's much too complicated to say, for example, to make a map of pterosaur sightings and then draw some conclusions about the particular rivers and streams and ponds and lakes and how they relate. No, we don't have nearly enough information for that. You look at any map in North America, and it's not a desert, but just most of the United States, and you magnify that Google map or whatever it is, you'll see lots and lots of little blue lines for streams and creek beds and ponds after pond after pond and lake after lake after lake. There's bodies of fresh water all over the 48 contiguous. Okay, I'll keep talking, but all right, we're connected again. Okay. Reconnection successful. Okay. I guess we're working. I don't know what happened there, but let's go over this. There's so much fresh water across North America and the 48 contiguous states. If you just leave out for a moment to deserts in the West and certain desert areas, perhaps in parts of Texas, Arizona, New Mexico, Nevada, there are so many bodies of water, even in some in arid regions and deserts, that there's no problem at all with the flying creatures having access to water, and they don't need to be close to them, except, of course, those cases we know of, for example, in the Northwest, where they seem to just generally regularly catch fish at night in the rivers. I'll give you some examples. In southeast Washington State, at the what's the name of that river now? Is it Yakima River? It's a strange name, but it's way down near the corner southeast edge of Washington State. Okay, we're still back on. Did we get disconnected again? Sorry. I think we had been disconnected there. We were disconnected again. There's so many areas in the United States that have water that flying creatures, large ones, can get to them so easily. If they're not relying on, for example, fishing at night, then they have no trouble getting to water, and they can find other food, whatever, all around. especially now that we have so many farm animals, cats and dogs that might be left out overnight in the nicer weather, summertime, for example. So many opportunities people don't know why their dog disappeared or their cat disappeared. And it could very well be from one of these flying creatures, ropens. So we have a long way to go before we can say anything about where they like to live, because the complexity of eyewitness sightings and yeah. I'm really anxious to get more information about how they get their food. I do have this report I've mentioned before in another live stream in the Maumee River, M-A-U-M-E-E. I think the river's name is spelled. That's in Antwerp, A-N-T-W-E-R-P, I believe, Antwerp, Ohio. And the man who reported to me what he saw said in this sighting, this long-tail, what I call a ropin, long-tail flying creature, goes over the bridge on the Maumee River, and it catches a sparrow in its mouth, mid-flight. Well, I know of reports of these modern pterosaurs that occasionally, at least, will try to catch birds, and sometimes they succeed, sometimes they don't. But in this case, it definitely succeeded. And there was another case back east years ago where somebody reported to me about one of these pterodactyls, as they're normally called, flying into a pond and immediately catching a waterfowl. The person didn't mention to me if it was a duck or something else, but it immediately flew off with the animal. The bird, I should say, the bird. Flew off with the bird. So sometimes they do succeed in catching a bird, and they might rely on water in that sense, but not that they're really tied to a particular location close to water. They can actually travel long distances and have certain route that they might take and say, oh, they fly to this particular pond, and whenever that might be, and check it out. If there's easy meal there, they'll go for that. And Trollman, 1965, says, I can understand many people's skepticism, but there are just too many eyewitness testimonies that are very believable for them to be discounted. Soldiers, pilots. That's true. Many. I've received hundreds of reports just myself. And those are direct accounts. I know I keep saying this over and over, but I'm not telling you rumors generally. There's exceptions, but mainly my experiences with these reports is that they are directly from the eyewitnesses, and they are very credible persons. They have no reason to lie for decades or years or whatever, to lie because they get ridiculed for it. Dwayne Hodgkinson had a sighting in 1944. He didn't always openly tell people, because generally they say, oh, what were you drinking? He was never a drinker. He didn't drink alcoholic beverages. It's just not his lifestyle. But people would ask him things like that. They wouldn't really believe him. So for a while he stopped. And then he went back in more recent decades to telling people, and he contacted one of my associates many years ago. And then eventually my associates and I were able to get with him and interview him many times and get lots of details. But yet, he's very credible. When he was videotaped by Garth Guessman, I edited the video later and put it on one of my channels. But Garth Guessman, my associate, was there with him this little airfield is close to Livingston, Montana, but not right next to it. It's a few miles away, but Livingston, Montana area, as I recall. And he was very credible. Look at he was a professional flight instructor. He teaches his people how to fly. That's his job. Do you think if he was just making this up and just lying about it for half a century, more than half a century, that he continued doing that when he was a flight instructor and have somebody videotape him and interview him right there, and where he does the teaching with the equipment there, where people can do practicing, with the mechanical practice stuff there to learn certain basics before they get an airplane to fly. You have to go through certain things first. You think you do that right there, when he's lying? And the things he said do not, they're very credible. He's just telling the truth. And we get people from other cultures. For example, there's another eyewitness, we could get into this, in New Guinea. See, back in a few decades ago, there was no Papua New Guinea. There was no country or nation called that. Australia was in charge. They had authority, and they took care of those islands, including this big island of New Guinea. And in 1944, Hodgkinson had his sighting, and he told me about that structure at the end of, where you can see here, the long horn-like structure at the back of the head. He told us about that. And I eventually drew a sketch, and I've showed this to you in other times, but I drew different sketches, and he chose the ones that would most be like what he remembered it. And it looked very similar to the composite sketch from sketches that were chosen by Brian Hennessy, who in more recent years and decades is a professional psychologist. He's not crazy, not likely. He's a professional psychologist. But he has a composite sketch, and those two look a lot alike. I think it's the same species, not the same island that the sightings were in. Hennessy's was in 1971, if I recall, on Bougainville Island. Hennessy's, Hodgkinson's, was in 1944, just west of Finchhaven on the mainland of New Guinea. But yeah, there's correlations, and I have very high credibility with the overall cases. You take these similarities and people of different cultures and the natives of the area who report the same thing. Gigantic flying creature with no feathers, has a very long tail. It comes up over and over and over. And the people are from different cultures. So how can that be? It's not because they saw it in somewhere and just imitated what they saw from a book or a magazine or TV. Some of the people I've interviewed probably have never seen a movie or a television in their lives. When I interviewed them, at least. Things have changed, maybe. But when I was interviewing them in 2004, these natives generally had never seen a film or a movie of any kind, television of any kind, and I asked straight out. I asked Gideon Coral, the native who had the sighting around the year 1994, excuse me, on Umboy Island, and I asked him, did you ever see a picture of a ropen in a book when you were at school? And he thought a moment, says, no. He was being honest. They don't have pictures of ropens in the school book, in the school, where they teach children and teenagers English and math and basic skills. No, they wouldn't have a picture of a pterodactyl. As far as I can tell from my experience with these schools on Umboy Island, they're very practical. I've not been to one of the classes. I'm just telling you, I'm pretty sure they just stick to very basic things that would be useful for them to progress in their lives. Not showing them things about is those island witnesses are not being paid. Sorry, a little while ago we got disconnected again. I'm sorry if you missed some stuff. I was talking about a lot of stuff. But anyway, is that those island witnesses are not being paid. That's true. And not getting anything for their testimony. They have no reason to be lying. Now, that's a good point. When I was there, I never paid. There was one exception where I didn't pay him. One exceptional case where a native wanted some money, and he was hoping that he'd get some. I didn't pay him any money. No, I didn't pay him a penny, nothing. But he was hoping for that, and that was the one eyewitness whose testimony differed from the others. So I'm not going to mention names, but I believe he was lying. He'd never had a sighting. He just wanted to get some money and hoping he'd get some money, and got nothing, of course. But he thought that he described a creature flying very low, just right over the ground, and had hair like a woman. And he described things that were just like traditions. They're kind of imitating certain traditions that they have, and not like what the other eyewitnesses are telling us. Yeah. And my associates, too, who came a few weeks later to that same island, this remote tropical island in the Southwest Pacific, Amboy, they also did not pay anybody for giving information. Nobody. No way. In fact, they were receiving a lot of hospitality and help, and certain things where they had to have some help getting somewhere. I think they did pay a little bit to the people who were carrying their luggage or something, but it was very little. I ended up paying huge amounts. I wasn't so good at that, at negotiating for different things. But none of us ever paid any native for a testimony. Never. That was against our style of doing business with the natives. Yeah, and they do correlate with Westerners when they are in that part of the world, for example, in the Southwest Pacific, and they report things. Yeah, the scientist and his wife, I still have not gotten permission to reveal their names yet. I've been out of touch with them. I should probably get in touch with them. But they were very clear. It was an extremely large flying creature at night that flew over a sports stadium, in Perth, Australia. I think near Heathridge residential neighborhood or something like that. And this was 1997. And the man was a scientist, and he gave a lot of details and admitted the possibility that there might be some fine hair on the certain part of the body, or I recall, maybe it was the wings. Anyway, something like, but he's not sure because of the distance. But he'd estimated the wingspan was between 30 feet and 50 feet. That's 50 feet. And after pondering about it, he got the feeling that the size of the wingspan of that flying creature was more like 50 feet, more like the larger figure, which is incredible. It's extremely large. Those animals are rare, that size. They are rare. But if anybody sees them, you cannot miss them. You're automatically going to be looking in that direction because of that huge size in general. And he described proportions and everything. And it was not precisely what I got in the dimensions. It was not precisely the dimensions I got from my research with the natives accounts. But I believe it's possibly within eyewitness error. In other words, when people estimate sizes of things, when you proportion how does the wings compared with the length of the tail, for example, in this case, and it still could be eyewitness error, could enter then, or it could be a different species, of course. It may be a different subspecies or a different species, I don't know. But I did notice some variation, but generally, these are huge, gigantic creatures with long tails, and when they're seen close enough to tell, they don't have feathers when they're seen that close. An audio piece says, are there any current explorations for the ropens currently going on or about to take place? Two of them I know is one in Mexico, and I don't know if that's actually started yet. It's not a close associate of mine. I've communicated with him occasionally over the years, and he does need some funds to have that take place, I think. As I understand, maybe he won't even go until he has certain funds that are contributions, and I could check on that, see if I can find out. But the other one is, I have a lot more information on. That is by Rex Yappy. And Rex, for several years now, has been off and on going on expeditions on Umboy Island. He was an eyewitness of an extraordinary daytime sighting of the ropen. A huge tail, 7 meters long, is his estimate of the tail of that ropen, what they saw in daytime. And he was not alone. There was other natives on the canoe, or actually, maybe it was a banana boat. Anyway, there's other eyewitnesses, and he has gone off and on. I think on the last maybe week or two, he might have left and gone back to the mainland, but I expect we'll be able to get him back over and find some way to get contributions to him somehow so that he can go back and search. I told him detailed method that if he can just go out one more time to Lake Pung, there's a certain procedure you can do that has a very high chance of being successful to get the rope and fly over the lake. And we'll get into that sometime. Do you recall ever hearing of a sighting in Ohio? Oh, yes. Trauma in 1965. Yeah, thank you for that question. Many sightings I have in Ohio over many years. I mentioned the one in Antwerp, Ohio, over the Maumee River. There's others. But yeah, I keep getting sightings there. In fact, think of one recently. I think it was Ohio. No, I could be mistaken. You do some research, do some looking for pterodactyl sightings in Ohio. I have so many web pages, I've lost track of how many blogs I have, but I have over 1,000 web pages and blog posts. But one report may have been Ohio, where there's this lady and her mother-in-law, and in daytime were in the backyard of the mother-in-law's house. And these are bird watchers. They know birds. I believe it was Ohio. I believe, but if not, it was in that same part of the country. And they saw a huge pterodactyl. I mean, they were just shocked. It was the size of an airplane. They were in shock. And so when people say, oh, if there were really living pterosaurs, then the bird watchers would see them, Well, bird watchers do see them. This don't be silly. Speculating. People assume that if certain things, if they really did exist and if pterosaurs were still alive, then they'd be in the newspapers, and then the scientists would study them, and they'd be discovered and all this. It's just a silly, just this thing that doesn't take into account the reality of the real world. We live in a real world with cultures in different parts of the world, in different countries, and with different languages. And our culture in the United States is that we're trained up from early childhood that all dinosaurs and pterosaurs of all types and all species became extinct many, many millions of years ago. And this is just indoctrination. It's just drilled into us from early childhood constantly. Anytime we talk to anybody, if the subject comes up at all of a dinosaur or pterosaur, almost immediately you get this thing about millions of years ago they lived. That's one of the challenges we have. Yeah, and also trauma in 1965. They're so interesting. So interesting being from and living in Ohio. I'm kind of biased to my state and limited will. Again, there's a lot of people living in Ohio. I believe that's part of the reason, maybe the major reason why there's so many sightings reported there. Sajad Bomber. What do you think about the Tombstone thunderbird? Well, you mean Tombstone, Arizona, as in the Tombstone epitaph newspaper article in the late 1800s? I have a copy of that. I don't have it ready to show you. I probably should deal with that. We need to have a whole live stream video where I can have the pictures all ready to show you these things. I just could talk about it from my memory. But that particular newspaper article is interesting. Be aware, at that time, that newspaper did not have the capability of printing any kind of picture, not just a photograph, but couldn't print any kind of image except text, just the words. It was that kind of primitive little simple printing system they had back then. So when people talk about the photograph of the giant pterodactyl in the article in the Tombstone newspaper back then in the late 1800s, they don't understand that it couldn't happen. They don't have that technology. Besides, I've seen the article anyway, and I can see it with my own eyes that there's no images or photographs or any kind of picture because they didn't have that capability, but they do have the article. Now, I don't believe it's very accurate. I think there's some major falsehoods in the article, but I suspect probably the origin of it may have been a real encounter, and there's reasons for that, but that's a long story. Apparently there are pictures of them, but they are lost. If you have them, maybe they're real. Well, yeah, let me try to get over here to I've lost the stream is getting kind of active here. Let me get this. I don't want to lose this communication here. Audio P, I believe people that are eyewitnesses, they keep quiet. If the truth comes out, people will want to capture it, make money off them, create a Jurassic Park hunting for them. Well, I'm limited in what I can say here because there is one person who has an idea. I can't mention I'm restricted in what I can say. But let's see, get back to the main page here. Oh, I'm trying to work with my computer with this. Thank you so much for fascinating discussion. I have to go, but we'll absolutely research sightings in my state. God bless you, sir. Well, God bless you, Trollman 965. Thank you so much for being here. What time is it here? 6:21. Okay, we've been live for almost an hour and a half, and I will be continuing now because we still have people active here. But there's a lot of things. I don't know what's going to happen if there's an official discovery. I'm sure there will be lots of universities and scientific organizations that will want to be searching for them, and professional wildlife photographers. What we need is just one professional wildlife photographer right now to be willing to get funding or whatever to be able to go and help us with an expedition here in the United States. I think that would be wonderful. Sajad the Spammer, have you seen the picture of a large pterodactyl in black? And there are many people which are holding it. There's quite a few pictures like that. They appear to be 19th century and the 1800s. There's quite a few. Mostly probably hoaxes, or not all of them. There's one little boy that looks like he has a military hat, and it looks like maybe the early 20th century. And some people call him a soldier, a small soldier. No, he's a child. He's a boy, and he's in the Boy Scouts. That's the kind of hat that they had in the Boy Scouts in the early 20th century. And what he's holding up could be a ropen. It's possible. I don't know. The head looks a little bit like a kind of turkey, kind of like it's not that clear, but it doesn't look like it's either a really good hoax or it's probably a pterosaur. Don't think it's a turkey. The wings just not turkey wings, not at all. They're like featherless. Well, we should have something like that sometime about newspaper articles about living pterosaurs, because there are quite a few of them, and some of them are old, like 1800s, and others are in the early 20th century, the early 1900s, and then there are some which are more recent, including 20th century. And some of them, they mention my name and mention what I say about them. Let's see. Okay, Sajad says, someone mentioned that they think it's fake because of the fact that it didn't match the pterodactyl too accurately. However, if they are surviving millions of years later, wouldn't they evolve and change? Yeah, the skeptics kind of ignore that idea. And yeah, that's a good point. A lot of the criticisms I've received in recent years have been that people report things that are different than pterodactyls should appear, like pterosaurs should be, which is totally irrelevant. It means nothing. It's not really a legitimate criticism. It doesn't deal with all the factors, and including that they're just making statements off the top of the head without mentioning any group of sighting reports. No, they just say something like, as if that means a bunch of things, and they just imagine something as if that's scientific, nonsense. I have hundreds of reports, and I sometimes get statistics on them. They do change over time when I get more data. So, for example, early in 2013, I got the statistics that, I want to get it technically right, is way over 90% of the sighting reports that involved the possibility of the tail or non-tail were of long tails. It's like a 20-to-1 ratio anyway. It was a 20-to-1 ratio, really big difference. I haven't done that recently with statistics, but 20-to-1 is a huge ratio. That means that basically the animals are mostly these long-tailed, what we call ropens. They're long-tailed. Strange, because the paleontologists generally believe that the long-tailed pterosaurs lived mostly before the short ones. In general, there's a lot of overlapping, but generally they lived earlier. And the ones that survived longer were the ones that did not have long tails. They had short tails. But the ones that are alive today, whatever you want to believe about the past, they are mostly long-tailed. They're ropens. And it's true. You can't say anything about whether they should be valid sightings based upon what you think about pterosaurs known from fossils. That's we have all kinds of discoveries of new species, new kinds of animals that we're discovering with different. Not anything as dramatic, of course, as a pterosaur, but still, all kinds of things that the scientists are discovering out in the wild. So let's see how things are going with we have about 9 people on with us here. We can keep going if anybody has any questions about anything we talked about or anything different that's come up. Generally, I just want to say that the vast majority of these flying creatures are not harmful to people. They don't attack people. They're not interested in people. They have their own particular animals that they catch for food, usually birds. And most of these flying creatures that are generally ropens, and they're mostly medium to small sizes, mostly. But people don't notice them, generally. Anyway, they generally have their own fish or birds that they catch, bats or whatever it is. They don't bother people. They try to not deal too much with people. Some of them get larger and they get bolder, and they sometimes get dangerous. And they can be those rare exceptions, which we have to be aware of, are in danger to humans. People can be killed by them even. They're dangerous. But they're rare, but it's nothing like a pandemic, a great disease which kills hundreds of thousands. It's nothing remotely like that. They're just cases where a person will be out at nighttime or possibly daytime, but at nighttime more likely. They'll be out somewhere and just have a bad luck if they're walking alone. They could just have the bad luck of being in the wrong place at the wrong time at night alone and be attacked. And I think some of those cases are what we find sometimes with missing persons. And we have books that have been written about such things, the 411, Now, this is not about pterosaurs. It doesn't say anything about anything like pterodactyls or pterosaurs, but it's just there are people that go missing for strange reasons. That happens. So, let's see. if nobody else has anything particular they want to mention here, it could be a good place to stop. It's about 6:30 p.m. in Utah. So we're going to continue live streaming on Friday, a week from today. And I hope we can get together again. Audio P, do you know any updates on the Explorer documentary? Is the movie video out? A documentary about the quest for Africa's megalizard? No, I don't. I don't know about that. It sounds familiar, but I really don't know any details. There's a lot of great documentaries out. Unfortunately, they generally just have the same dogma, unscientific dogma about extreme ideas about universal extinctions of general types of animals. Be careful about the dogma of universal extinction of all species and types of a general kind of animal like a dinosaur or pterosaur. It's just not scientific. No matter how much people repeat it, no matter how many scientists keep repeating it, still not scientific. So, thank you so much for joining us. We'll get back together a week from tonight, or in the afternoon, depending on where you are, or whatever time zone you're in around the world. Thank you so much for being here. Be safe, and let's get together again. This coming Tuesday, late in the afternoon or in the evening, I will be interviewed, but I don't have the details on that yet. Sorry about that. But, yeah, it's been great tonight. Have a good evening.